don't move into the middle of big cities. They like move
Yeah.
as far away from human beings as possible.
Yeah.
And but like living in New York teaches you how to be, a sort of a member of the world
Yeah, you're a
because
member of a society, right? And like I personally, we still live in Brooklyn, and like Brooklyn, I live in Crown Heights, and it's
yeah. Oh, it's great.
a phenomenal place to live. And like what I love about, I grew up in Michigan, like a small college town, and that was great for what it was. But for me, I'll never want to move out of Brooklyn. Like we have a
Yeah.
house here, and like anytime you walk out the door, you walk out the door. I walk for an hour, and like you're just constantly assaulted is the wrong word, but you're inspired by like people congregating and all these different reasons. It's just there's a
It's
small concert of like 20 people. And it seems to be like just the friends of the musicians or something like that who came
right.
out for it. But it's like this is beautiful. Like you get, and then you stop and you watch somebody play the cello on the sidewalk for
Hmm.
however long, or have this group of friends doing this. It's an amazing place. It's an amazing place
There's
to be.
the what is it that the third place. Um, I don't know what the word I'm trying to look for, but there's a term called the third place, and that's what Starbucks built their business on. The idea is that people have their home and they have work, and and like what they did
Yeah,
is say, we're building a third place, and that third
yeah,
place is a place you can come and spend time with, and we're never going to question how long you're here and why you're here.
right.
Hang out. Well, New York City is that third place in
Yes,
entirety. You
yes,
can like you said, someone playing the cello. Like we've crossed. I mean, in the years we've found musical acts that we've listened to for the last 20 years,
yeah,
like who have like moved on
yeah,
to become really like kind of like influential or really good artists. And you're like,
yeah,
and they were just standing on the corner playing.
yeah,
Like that was it. And
yes, yes.
so it's a magical it's the best. It's the best place. Hey,
Yeah,
hold on 2 seconds. You ready?
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Isn't that's the trick. Hey, welcome to the Big Story
Thank you
podcast.
so much. I'm excited to be here.
We have Deniz Camp today. I'm really psyched. Yeah, it's already fun talking. So welcome aboard the mayhem. You have a very exciting backdrop. I love
I'm
it.
excited to be here.
My background's too nutty to have. I need to have like a flat surface of some sort, and then
It,
I can.
you have a nice background. I'm in a just in a random, white room.
Are
So
you in
it's
are you in a Starbucks? Be honest.
no Starbucks. It is a bedroom. It is a bedroom, but there's nothing nice on the walls. So
Oh well. Yeah. So yeah. So okay. We've checked that off the list. We both love New York City. Where did
yeah,
you? You said you came from Michigan. Where in Michigan?
yeah. So I actually had a bit of a strange background. My father is Turkish and my mother's from the Philippines. And
Okay. Wow.
I was born in the Philippines, but then moved to the United States at a pretty young age and grew up mostly in East Lansing, Michigan,
Sweet.
which
Yeah. No,
is
I have a sibling who lives there.
oh really,
Yeah.
in East Lansing specifically?
Yeah. And yeah. And
Oh, that's
my
awesome.
father-in-law is born and raised in Lansing. So
Oh
yeah.
wow. Oh
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I don't. That's yeah. That's awesome. So yeah, my parents were professors at Michigan State,
Gotcha.
and
I'm sorry they weren't in Michigan at University of Michigan, but that's cool.
well, that's where I went to undergrad. So I'm right there with you, buddy.
You're right. All right. You're on the Wolverine side of the
Yes.
argument.
Yeah.
Nice. Good.
It depends on whether it's basketball or football, but yeah. But generally, I'm for Wolverines, but
Yeah.
with a carve out for Michigan State basketball because I
Well,
grew
it's
up.
hard to deny Magic Johnson.
Yeah, I mean exactly. And I grew up specifically when we were Michigan State. Like I was in high school when we became national champions, and
Okay.
like we won the national championship. And so we had like a specific team, and they were like a big part of the community. Like they would
Yeah.
come, like Mateen Cleaves, who was the captain at the time. He and a few of the other players would like come to the high school and play games of pickup, and like they
Hey.
were. So it was like very formative for me. So I have a specific carve out for Michigan State basketball.
Well, so U of M basketball didn't sort of gain any notoriety until the fabled, dreaded, whatever you want to call the Fab Five.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was sort of like this really exciting moment, and then like it just sort of imploded, and yeah.
Yeah.
So listen, it's all about Wolverines football for me. So
Yes. Well, I'm right there with you on that. Yes.
yeah,
I'm right.
let's talk Big House. Um,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah, no, I've known a few writers who who went to Michigan U of M. Like
Yeah.
there's like a good stable of writers who come from that school. So
And in comics specifically as well.
yeah, no, one of them was a student of mine at an ad school,
Oh,
and all he wanted to do was write comics. Like he just
yeah.
like, he's there to get a job being an ad writer. He ended up becoming an adventure sport like person. Like they have these things like where like there are these adventure sports where like there's a team of 3 and they get dropped off like in Borneo and they've got to make it to another
Oh,
location.
wow.
Like bike and kayak and climb, like all this nutty stuff. And like for years, he'd be like, "Hey, we're going to be like doing a thing in New York City. Can we leave a kayak in your apartment?" And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "I guess." You know.
Yeah.
Um,
I cannot imagine anything more different than writing comic books than being an adventure sports.
totally, like it's so crazy. Like really cool guy. You know.
Yeah.
And Rick, if you're out there, you know, drop me a line, man. Like I'd love to catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nutty. So okay, so you sort of shirked all of the Lansing pride and went off to Ann Arbor.
Yes.
So like, were you dragging a few long boxes with you to Ann Arbor, or had you been like not yet inoculated or in
Yeah. I would say it was more like I dropped off. So in high school I was very into comics, and then in college, you know, I got caught up in other things. You know, I just meeting people and all of that. And then, but I still had my shop there. This Vault of Midnight, it's still there, and
Nice.
they're still awesome. And so I would still go occasionally, but it was just less of an intense, it was less of an intense thing. And then I further after college, I even went further away from comics because I was doing graduate school, and then I was working abroad for a while. I was working in South America and eventually Turkey, and then kind of when I was in Turkey, I kind of started playing with the idea of writing comics as an opportunity, or as something that I might want to do just maybe as a career, but at the very least as a hobby. And so I started kind of fooling around with that.
What were you studying for undergrad and then for your graduate degree?
So my undergrad was in cell and molecular biology, and then my graduate degree was in medicine. I went to medical school.
Doctor.
Yeah.
Dentist.
I went to medical school at the Cleveland Clinic. So I stayed in the Midwestern region, let's say.
Sure. Okay. That's okay. All right. Right on. So yeah. So
it was a big transition, and then I went abroad to do medical work, and so I was
but you know, it's so interesting because like, you know, reading your books, like I'm like, oh, like there's like, it's so not like, I mean, your books have you have a very strong sort of international kind of thing mixed with sort of like human condition sort of stuff.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So like so when you're sort of saying all this stuff, I'm like, okay, yep, that tracks. Okay. I can see where the influences of just sort of experience kind of come into play there.
100%. I think having grown up with two parents from two different countries was a huge thing, because we were going every summer. We would spend all summer in one country or the other, alternating.
Wow.
And so that was because all of our family is there. All of my mom's family is, you know, we had a very small and kind of isolated family situation in the United States. But then we would go abroad, we would go home, and that's where all of my mother's, you know, family is. And then in Turkey, you know, my family is like a mafia almost there. It feels like, you know, they're just very intertwined and you know, constantly seeing each other. And so that was always a trip. And just hearing those different voices, I think you see a lot of that in the work, probably, is I play with the voice a lot, because I like to, you know, how you translate something there. First of all, it can change the meaning of the thing, right? And then it has its own kind of a poetry to it. And so I try to do that with characters that aren't from the United States.
Yeah. And that, I definitely, like with, you know, what's behind your head. You can't see it, but we can. You know, the 20th Century Men is definitely sort of point
Yes.
on, you know, with that. So, what are your parents? What do they teach? What are, you know?
Yeah, my dad went to he got his master's in electrical engineering, but then went into economics. So he's an economics professor.
Interesting. Okay.
But he's also like he's like a much smarter person than me. So he's also a painter, much more talented, just generally like kind of a prodigy within Turkey. And then and because he went to like the fancy, you know, the fancy private, like he got a scholarship to the fancy private school that everybody,
Okay.
like if you mention it in Turkey, everyone's like, oh my God, he went there. And I'm just kind of like the idiot son here in the United States. And my mom, she taught like mass media law and policy, so
Okay.
more communication stuff,
All right.
in at the university there. Yeah. So
And
I grew up with a lot of lectures. I guess I guess.
well, I mean, like it's interesting because like there is a very sort of like there's a lot of discourse in families with, you know, people in sort of higher education, like, so there's a lot of discussion that's happening, you know.
Yes.
You know, you're not just, you like there, hey, let's discuss topics and subjects and things like that.
100%.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that was like the normal thing. Like at the end of the nighttime, my parents would have a discussion about whatever it is,
right,
philosophy or politics or whatever, and I would be included in that kind of, and kind of
right,
you're
right.
yeah, it was a huge leg up, I think, in life to have that kind of an environment. Like it's a
I
big
think that,
privilege of mine.
yeah, and I think, and I don't think this is something that is just exclusive to, you know, it should be or is exclusive to people who are only in academia. Like, I mean, the thing
100%.
is like the education you give your child on including them in the thought process and the experience of what you're going through in life is like invaluable. Like it's so,
100%.
yeah, and it's so like it's so important because like, I mean, I'd like I have friends of mine who are like, you know, they all went like to Yale, and these guys are like, they're brilliant to talk to
Yeah.
because like that's the whole thing is like, let's just keep talking, let's figure
Yes.
it out, let's get through this. um
And
yeah,
I think a lot of conflict. I mean, that's one of my central thesis of my work is like a lot of conflict arises from miscommunication.
uh-huh,
The slippage between my meaning and your interpretation
sure,
of what I've said. And so I find that, so I think the more that you, almost everything can be resolved through honest and, you know, and vulnerable expression. If you just keep talking it out,
yeah,
hopefully you can arrive at something like where if even if you don't come to an agreement about what things should be, you can at least come to an understanding about how it's making another person feels, how it makes another person feel, and that in and of itself kind of, you know, makes them more human, and it makes you kind of understand where they're coming from, and it diffuses a lot of the animosity and the anger, because it's like, well, okay, that's not how I meant it, but that's how you're taking it, and I can see why it made you feel that way, and I'm
sure,
sorry. So I think that's true of not just of, you know, artistic work, but just in your life, in the
yeah,
conflict that I've had in my life.
yeah. I mean, I think I mean it's, you know, I mean, like it's like, you know, anger is like 90% of anger is something that is not being communicated from yourself.
Yes.
And so like when you're like having, you know, when something's happening, it's like when somebody's speaking to you and then you get angry, well, what it is probably you just have not expressed yourself clearly enough in the you know, in the lead up to this. So now you're upset with yourself, and now you're
Yes.
turning it on to somebody else, because it's a lot way better to get mad at someone else than yourself.
Yeah.
So
Hurt feelings on both sides. Both people have some kind of hurt feelings due
yeah,
to miscommunication, and then we all just say things we don't mean, or, you know,
yeah,
we say the things that we fear rather than the things that we actually think. Like, you don't care about me, or whatever it is.
sure.
You know.
And like, and I think like with, you know, with comics is like, you know, it's a very like, it's a very contained story setting. You don't have a lot of real estate to do a lot of stuff. So it's
Yeah.
really hard to express the nuance of those type of things, you know, you know, in a literary sense, because you don't have the real, you just can't do it. Like,
I always say comics is better at the proposition than the interrogation, just because it doesn't have
yeah,
the space. But it's an amazing thing to propose an idea and for that idea to be striking in a, you know, in maybe distilled down to an image or something like that. But for the back and forth, I think, or for the really, really sort of deep internal interrogation, that's the novel's form. Like that's
oh dude, that makes me, because here it makes me wonder, like, if that proposition factor is so powerful, that's probably a big reason why comics have been so successful in the terms of film.
100%, yeah,
Moved into film, because you have this, once again, a very confined and contained period.
exactly.
Like, no one's going to sit for a 7-hour film, so
Yeah.
you got to get it, get that whole proposition out there, and maybe you can kind of express it a little longer, maybe in a series.
Yeah.
But the episodes are chopped up, so you
Yeah.
don't get the chance to really kind of run with it. So it's kind of a perfect format, and maybe that's why I'm not a big video game player. Like, it kind of stops with Combat from Atari for me, so that's how long ago. But like, video games don't translate to film.
Yeah, because story is not. I mean, of course, some might, I suppose, but it's really about the experience, the individual experience of that one person. I think,
right,
playing the game, and that's not what film is about.
No. I mean, it's funny because, like, books and comics are closer to that experience because they are active things. You have to pick up, open up, and engage with whatever the printed medium is, whether it's a comic book or a book. And so the reader is exchanging something in time for the efforts that the artists have put onto the paper.
Yeah. It's not just, you're not just receiving, for sure. Like, you're a more active participant. And I really like that about comics, is it's kind of an in-between state, right? I mean, in a novel, you're completely inventing almost everything in your head. I mean, the words are painting the pictures, but exactly how that configures in your head, that's all you. And that's great. That can be really great. And then comics, is a little bit further, where an artist is doing a lot of that work, but then you are also, there's a lot of space in between for you to be filling in the gaps, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, the time, because panels aren't sort of like this and this and this and this and this and this. That's the steps in animation, like those are the tweens. But like, if you're writing these sequences and scenarios of events that are happening, but they're not this sort of smooth flow. It's a time period that happens in between, and we as the reader get to go, because like, you're changing scenes now. The reader, you can come up with your head how you got to that from point A to point D, like, and that's a kind of a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing, and I think it allows people to become very invested in the work, because they're investing themselves into the story, right? And it's interesting to see. There's Elsa Chatelier, who's a comic book artist. She's doing Love Everlasting right now with Tom King.
She was almost a guest on my podcast.
Oh yeah, she's amazing, and she's
fantastic.
She has a YouTube channel where she translates, or one of the installments, I don't know what you call it, episodes, is she translates a scene from Reservoir Dogs into a comic page, right? And that is right there. That is a perfect illustration of the difference, because actually quite a lot gets lost. I mean, a lot gets cut. A lot of specific little bits get cut to turn this whole scene into one page, but it is in its own way as effective, right? It's a different experience. It's a completely different experience, because the film has more of this space, and there's also something about the charisma of an actor on screen that is very hard to replicate through images. I think just that baseline human thing of seeing a real human face. That is a powerful thing, and it's also very powerful to see, in a different way, to see a simplification of a human face, that the profile of the Homer Simpson that you can recognize like that. That's also powerful in its own way. But with her work, though, you can see a lot gets cut from that scene, and a lot gets lost, but also you get something else. You get the same idea transmitted to you in a much faster, in a much quicker way. Almost, you can with glancing for a few seconds, you can get what's happening, which is really powerful. And I think one of the powerful things about comics, and like you said, you're also participating, because you're, it's the picture of the knife, but you're seeing the knife, slash or whatever. You're making that happen.
Yeah, and the thing is like, aside from like incredibly like sort of highly detailed rendered artwork, um, most art allows the viewer to kind of fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like really kind of interpolating your own personality and pressing it into the artwork and the images, bringing them to life in your mind
Yeah.
when you're looking at the looking and reading a comic. So yeah, it's I
Especially
mean
cartoonists, like the best cartoonists, like I feel that their work plays out almost like a an animation in your head,
yeah.
because they care so much about the flow of the page and the
Mhm.
each panel, how it's composed or whatever. So I mean, they are doing a lot of work to help you do the work, but you're still fundamentally doing the work, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense.
No, and I think, and you said something about the charisma of the actors. I mean, I think that there are, and I think this is a sort of an X factor when it comes to artists, in the comic industry. Or there are some artists who are so engaging with their characterizations
Yes.
that they really do have that charisma and those acting chops when
Yeah.
you're looking at the comic and going, yeah, like this is
Yeah.
happening, like it's
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Totally. I mean, what I respect, what I think comic book artists are generally great at, and what they do better than most film or anything is the composition of a panel. Like obviously a scene, you can see beautiful scenes that are composed, but it's like every panel of a comic can be that beautiful, can have that same level of beautiful composition that you might see once in a while in a movie. And
Yeah.
that is an amazing thing. I mean, that is truly an amazing thing, I think.
Yeah, and it's I think if the panels and the frame of a film are the
Analogous.
apples and apple,
Yeah.
but the thing is the page composition is the
Hmm.
equivalent of the editing of a film, because you're
Absolutely.
now taking something larger and editing a scene into one page where you can
Yeah.
kind of get this greater sense of story on a thing. And that's like, so, but as a writer, that's a real challenge,
Yeah.
to do this, because when I talk to a lot of, and I was guilty of it myself when I was a young creator. When I wrote stuff, I would sit there and I would draw out,
Yeah.
each sort of panel and frame and go, okay, yeah, that's the story I want to tell. And you would kind of then write words down to match what you were drawing.
Yeah.
If you had to hand those over to somebody to say, hey, here's what this is what this is. Do you approve of this? Can I do this? But when you're writing, from blank page,
Yeah.
and this is to go off to somebody else, the challenge is great in the terms of how do you tell a story that is translatable to someone who has to visually tell the story without
Yeah.
sort of like too much hand holding and not enough hand holding,
Yeah. I mean, the challenge is, as a non-visual storyteller, how do I tell a visual story?
Right.
Because the goal is for us to tell a visual story. And so I need to be thinking visually as much as possible,
Yep.
while also thinking about all the non-visual things, right? And then the art, and then so it's the truth is, the level of hand holding or leeway that you give the artist is just going to depend on the project and on the artist
Yeah.
themselves. And each artist is going to change things, and for the better, almost always for the better. And it's our job to kind of adapt to that, I think. And so
Did you struggle with that?
yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Because you have something in your head and you want it to be like in your head.
Mhm.
And you can find artists that can give you something that's basically this, almost exactly the same, but even better. And that's amazing. But then I like on 20th Century Men, Stepan, who's the artist on this book, he'll often change things pretty dramatically. And at first that it put me on my back foot, because
Mhm.
not because he wasn't right, because what he was doing was he was telling the story the way it needed to be told visually, to make it the
Right.
most visually compelling and visually clear version of what I wrote as possible. But for me, it put me on my back foot at first, because of purely of a lack of confidence in myself, of being able to get something great out of myself in response to that. But
Mhm.
what I found was that I actually, because he had put all this work into making it, so coherent and beautiful and flowy and perfect in a visual thing, I'm inspired by the work that he does to then put out something that was way better than what I had previously written. So
Totally.
this book in particular is a real collaborative experience of, like, I'm writing very detailed scripts. He's taking those scripts and sometimes he follows them pretty much panel for panel, but sometimes he changes them dramatically. And then whatever happens, whether it's very similar to what I originally wrote or not, I look at the pages as if they're a new thing, and I try to rewrite them for this new thing.
It's such an interesting thing, that the crazy sort of like handoff collaboration of comic books, because an artist and a writer can have a lot of phone calls and emails and text chains going on, but then like when the words are handed over for the pictures, like there is a sort of like trust fall factor that happens, and you kind of like go, all right, and like like you had that moment like where you mentioned like about the the page, maybe the pages being laid out differently, or the sequence not happening the way you had put it down on paper and words. And it's like going back to that sort of that argument sort of point of view, like you could get angry, but the anger may be like, oh, maybe I just didn't make this clear enough, or like
I was wrong.
Like, it's better.
Now
I got to be angry. Am I angry that it's better? Like what is that sort of like that kind of thing? And I think like I love it. I love getting something back that's different and an improvement, because it allows me to kind of like reimagine what's happening. And use the words that I have available, whether it's dialogue or narration, to improve what's already been improved. Like you just keep kind of building up this layers of like,
and you end up going to a place that the end result ends up being better than either of you could have possibly done on your own. And something that, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of my own work. I'm a pretty big critic of my own work, and I'm always trying to get better. But I mean, 20th Century, when I read something like 20th Century Man, I really feel like, oh yeah, I don't know how this happened, kind of. Like I don't know how this end result happened. It seems somehow beyond. It certainly seems beyond me, and I think Stepan feels the same way. That it feels kind of beyond him, and we don't really understand. We're proud of it. We're super proud of this, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's a great feeling of like, we stepped a little bit beyond ourselves somehow. We stepped outside of ourselves to create. And I think, the best art, the best collaborative art is like that, where you're all coming together and all of your strengths are adding up and all of your weaknesses are compensated for. And I think, having a great team on any comic book is like that. And
it's like a great band,
Exactly. It's very intimate, like exactly like a band. It's exactly like a band. Much more so, I think, and that's the appeal over something like television or film for me as a writer. It's just that, I'm heavily represented on the page, and the relationship is very intimate with my collaborators. And so, I have, and you wouldn't get that so much in TV and film. It's just, there's just too many people.
No, I mean, although I guess just one of those sort of like, it'd be so fun to work in a writer's room for a while. Like, I think it would be such a joy just to be constantly like bing, 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 knocking things out to kind of like, all right, what about this? What about that? Of course, I would be the slowest typist in that writer's room, and that would make me really upset with myself. So how, like I'm very clear on how low of a form of art my mother considered comic books. Who was bringing me to Kandinsky shows when I'm like 4 years old, and at the Modern. So like
awesome.
So like all that stuff really does like settle in, but I was also really, really conscious of like, she just like did not dig comic books, and that's all I cared about as a kid.
Same with my parents. It was I was not allowed to read it. I was not allowed to read comics.
So like how, like, so I mean, like God, there's so many sort of angles we can go this. let's just be really pedantic first and go, okay, well, what were the things, like what grabbed you about comic books when you were young, and like how old were you, and then like what was it?
Yeah, I think it was, for me at first it was really just it was the power fantasy of it. You know, I
Sure.
was a lonely kind of I'm an only child. I was the child of two immigrants, so I didn't really understand people that very Americans that well, because you know there's just all of these things that you naturally learn about how to interact with people that were, because of how I was raised, I didn't naturally learn those things. I had to, you know, the way that I interacted with my parents and what was normal and what was acceptable was not really necessarily the what was true when I went to school the
There were
first time.
two, like there were two of you.
Yeah, exactly. And so I spent a lot of time, you know, kind of isolated, not in a mean way, like not kids treated me poorly
No,
or
no,
anything like that. Just like you're standing on the other side of the glass and you're pressing your face on the glass and you don't understand how they got on the other side of the glass. You know what I
right.
mean? And
Yeah.
it's there. It wasn't that people treated me poorly or anything like that. I feel compelled to mention that because I think a lot of people have that kind of like you're bullied, and no, it was just there was just a distance, and I felt comics represented that for, you know, in a big way. You know, Superman, especially Superman, was one person and then another person, and
Mhm.
that kind of that duality, Batman was one person and another person, made a lot of, you know, made a lot of sense to me, I think.
Yeah.
And so it was even before comics, it was the cartoons, the Batman cartoons, the Superman cartoons. I love that stuff even before I was able to read the comics, the superhero stuff.
Right.
And then you know, I just I so I kept loving it, and would sneak buying my own comics as much as possible, while at the same time real kind of being ashamed of it because I knew that my parents hated it, and at the time it also wasn't cool for kids to like comics. Like it wasn't cool
Right.
for people in their teens to like comics. It wasn't something that I would tell anyone. Nobody knew that I liked comics in high school, right? Where I was high school, I was starting to figure out how to like get people to like me, but I was very much keeping that you know, secret about
Gotcha.
myself. And so but I was very intensely into them at the same time, right? Like because
Mhm.
I was going home and I was reading them constantly. And so it was really just as a fan, I was really just enjoying them, I guess, for that simple fantasy stuff. And then I became very into Grant. We would go to Barnes and Nobles a lot. My parents would let me go to Barnes and Nobles and just stay there for like 6, 7, 8 hours to
Okay.
read.
Yeah.
Speaking of, we were talking earlier about Starbucks being a third place.
Right.
Barnes and Nobles was kind of that third place. You know, on a Saturday, I would just go to Barnes. My mom would drop me off, and I would get to be there for 8 to 10 hours just to read on the couches.
Yeah.
And there I discovered Grant Morrison's Justice League, which was huge for me. That was, and I didn't really even understand that. I thought what I liked was the Justice League, but I realized certain volumes I seemed to be liking more than others, and it was all the Grant Morrison stuff. So then with my own money, I went and bought all of the Grant Morrison stuff and realized, oh, you know, realizing in a deep way that creators matter a lot to what I'm
Yes.
enjoying. And that specifically, you know, the Howard Porter drawn issues are the ones that I like the
My
best.
man Howard.
Yes. You know, like I, and I, and I, you know, I would take those issues and I would take tracing paper and I would trace the characters and
Oh yeah.
try to make my own comics. And I think I mentioned that once to Howard, like online, and he was so nice and generous about it. He was just like, that's the, you know, that's the greatest compliment you can pay an artist. I used to do exactly the same thing,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
with my favorites, you know. So
Howard is the nicest guy.
for
He's
a
the best.
legend, and for
He's
a legend who's been doing this forever and a genius. And
the
I mean,
best.
his life story is incredible. Like the losing his ability to draw with one hand
Yep.
and then learning to draw with the other.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, no, no,
driving.
no. Howard's amazing. I maybe one day I'll get him on the show and we'll talk because I mean I met Howard when he was, I think he was still in college.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, he was either still in college or just got out and just started doing the Ray. Like it was a
The
great.
Ray. I was just going to mention the Ray. Yeah, that was great.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, we
With
yeah,
Priest, I think.
we met at this comic convention in, oh god, am I blanking? Just it's like right below, oh, I want to say it's right below the Tappan Zee Bridge. But
Okay.
there's a high school up there that has a comic book club. And every year they would have a convention in I don't know when they had it. So like I show up, they asked me, like I was at the New York Comic Con before it was the New York Comic Con back in
Wow.
the 90s. And the guy's like, hey, would you come up to our show? And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. So I go up, and like, it was the nicest thing. They gave us food and all this stuff. Like, they're still doing it. Like, somebody put up,
Really?
they gave everybody this last year like a ceramic coffee mug, like, but with the logo of the comic convention on it, but like not like one that you order like from like swag.com. Like, it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like
yeah.
handmade. And
Wow.
so I roll into this place, get my table, and this young guy sitting next to me, and it's Howard. And like, we like total, just had the best time together. And it was like the nicest convention. And I met like a lifelong friend from just going to this small little high
Yeah,
school convention, which they're still doing. And God bless
that's
comics, right?
awesome.
Yeah,
That's
he's the
so
best.
cool that you know Howard that well. That's amazing. I don't know him at
Oh
all, to
yeah.
be clear. I'm just a
Oh
fan.
no, no,
But
he's the greatest, the humblest, and the greatest. Like,
yeah,
it's
he's got
yeah,
this modern Kirby. His work has this modern Kirby thing for me that it's just like it's so powerful
great.
and dynamic.
Yeah.
That I can't get enough of it. His work today is better than his work before. Which is an amazing thing as an artist, I think. Um,
He's crazy good, and yeah, I mean, it's yeah, he deserves every bit of attention everyone gives him, but don't bother him too much
yeah,
because he's a shy guy. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah, and he's
absolutely.
funny, probably one of the funniest people I know. Just
Really, that's lovely to hear.
yeah, hysterical, just the driest, funniest sense of humor that he's brilliant. So yeah, but what you said, which is super super important, aside from Howard being great, is it's it's that recognizing these talents, these individual talents. Not that like, oh, this is an amazing comic book, I love comic books. It's when you start recognizing these individual talents.
Yes,
And and I guess maybe like the question gets popped in your head, if you sort of pursue this stuff in life, you go, how did
yes,
someone do this? How did they get to that? Like, what were the things? And like for me, I was always a big on forensically disassembling stuff.
yes,
Like,
100%.
yeah, like, how is this done? And I think even on storytelling and on writing, like, you just look at something and you go, okay, well, what do I do? How did they get to this point? Yeah, it's a job. So like, I mean, but you were doing that. You were taking things
Yeah,
apart.
I think I was doing that from a young age in a kind of a you know a more childish way of just
Mhm.
taking tracing bits and trying to create my own comics from the bits that I was tracing. And then as I got older, I would take the pieces of work that I really loved, and then I would really just intellectually try to break down what was going on, like what was
Right.
really effective about this, like why did it work. And I would write that stuff and put it online in a blog that is thankfully long erased. When I was
It's
when
never
I
gone.
yeah,
It's
it's never
no,
gone. It's somewhere.
gone.
Yeah. I think I was doing that a little bit. I was doing a little bit of that in college, a little bit of that in high school, and so it was like that was all I was doing, and that was good enough for me. It was just kind of like the annotations for a new Grant Morrison book,
Right.
or just taking apart and taking apart the craft of this, and just what is this creator doing that's so effective? What is happening with a Brian K. Vaughan book, that is working, especially Brian
Mhm.
K. Vaughan, because he's so religious about his structure. The He uses kind of especially on something like Why the Last Man, every issue kind of had the same structure, but it was always working.
Mhm.
And so that was really interesting to me. And so I would take those things apart, and the best creators are the ones who do that. I know Paul Levitz learned how to write. He said by taking apart old Roy Thomas Avengers issues, and I know that Matt Fraction, who's still
Yeah.
a genius and still
Yeah.
pushing things forward constantly. He used to post, like one time he posted a breakdown of a scene in Daredevil Born Again that was
Mhm.
like very complicated. It was a very complicated scene that Miller and Mazzucchelli had come up with together. And anyway, so it's like that process, that desire to break things down, I think, which is which is not just for storytelling. It's for science, and it's for all. It's something that I was taught to do, I think, from a
Yeah.
young age. And so, and then also learn to try to figure out how to, how to get in past that pressed glass of human interaction in the United States. All
Yeah.
of that kind of stuff, all those things are kind of the same thing. I think they're all the same impulse. They all come from the same impulse, and so they've all kind of fed into each other over the years, I think, and have allowed me to, with no formal training, become a comic book writer. Which you don't
Right.
need any formal training, but it has been one process. It has not felt like a complete shifting of gears.
Sure. And what was your first I guess experience with seeing a comic script?
Yeah. Again, it was Grant Morrison stuff. I was just such a
Okay.
huge fan of, and Alan Moore. I was such a huge fan of those two creators, and I still am a huge fan of those two creators, that I went online and I would get the kind of, I guess you call it the errata, the extra stuff from, I wanted to see how Alan Moore made the things that he made, like,
Right.
because they're amazing, that he was a part of making, because they're amazing. And then I saw that, and that, again, I'm no Alan Moore. I'll never be an Alan Moore, and my scripts don't look like Alan Moore scripts. But just seeing the language that he was using and what you could do, how specific you could get, and the way that he would say, "Well, we're going to use this shot for this because it's going to create this effect." That was really powerful to see somebody saying that in a script for me. Oh, that's, you can do that, or and then as time went on, I saw more and more scripts from friends that would just ask for help editing them. And a friend of mine is named Brett Lewis, and he did a book called The Winter Men.
Brett and I, we went to art college together.
Oh, you went to, so
Yeah.
did you study with Simonson as well, or?
No, so Simonson, so I was at the last, last two, maybe year after or 2 years after, were the Eisner years.
Okay.
So a friend,
Wow. Wow.
so another college friend of ours who's been on the show, Mike Pennick, if you want to catch his episode from how long ago, Mike, so Mike heard that you could get a, I don't know what, like
An arts degree, like a.
well, no, you could get, the school would basically let you have a person come in and sort of be like a special teacher to you for your
Oh
senior.
yeah, like an advisor or something like that.
Yeah, like a mentor kind
Yeah.
of art mentor thing. And Mike misinterpreted it like what it was, and thought that you could just get anybody. So he was like, okay, well, I'm going to get Walt Simonson. So he reached out to Walt Simonson, and Walt's like, yeah, I guess so. That sounds pretty good. And then the school's like, no, it has to be somebody
A
within
professor,
the school, within the school. But Walter, being Walter, was super cool and sort of like nicely, kind of like kept in touch with Mike, and would give Mike feedback and et cetera.
That's
and so forth.
amazing. Walt is such a sweetheart. Yeah.
That was the intro. So within the year or two, Will is like, hey, I'm, because Mike isn't a pushover. He was sort of like, he lobbied, he fought the school saying, no, this is the guy I want because he's the greatest comic book guy doing comics now.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, it has to be someone in the school. So Mike didn't get what he wanted, but what happened was the school, I grilled Walter about this, like at Charlotte a couple months ago. And so the school eventually reached back out to him and said, hey, would you be interested in coming and teaching at the school? So so Brett, along with Kevin McCarthy and a bunch of other really amazing people,
JP Leon, John Paul Leon.
Yeah, John. I'm gonna sit here and tell you stories.
I was gonna say, I don't want to make this any more about me. Like, this is way more interesting to me. Your life has been way more interesting. You were there when Eisner was there.
Yeah. So anyway, so as a result, Brett was fortunate enough to be in the school sort of with the sort of the old vanguard of the SVA teaching, Illuminati, and then it shifted over to Walter and that really great writer who wrote on Justice League in the 90s. Like it was just all these great people like kind of shifted, and Denny O'Neil I think was involved with the
Oh
school.
wow.
It was a beautiful kind of transition. And yeah, so Brett,
Dematis maybe or something. Yeah.
maybe. Oh wait, yeah, it was it was Dematis. Yeah, it was Dematis. Yeah. But yeah,
so I mean, seeing Brett's attention to the details of how a
yes,
script can be formatted and how dialogue, how he's playing with the punctuation and the and the language as well. That was a huge influence for me too. Just to know what was possible, what you could do. I think that's I mean, I guess that's one of the sad things about comics not having an actual or a traditional pipeline, is that you don't get those kinds of mentorships unless you are lucky enough to
sure.
seek them out or to meet those people and to have them invest in you. That can be, I mean, that was for me very valuable, seeing the Alan Moore scripts. Not that I know him personally, but seeing the Alan Moore scripts, the Grant Morrison scripts, and the Brett scripts, just seeing all that stuff. And luckily you can find those online, you can download them. I think you're totally good to just pirate that stuff if you can find it.
It's and I mean, I think, and no more so is it like how fruitful is it now? Like if you think about it, like you can get your hands on so many scripts right now, and you can actually look at the comic book and look at the script and say, okay, here's where we are from this to this. Like that, the information that you can like autodidactically like hunt down and bring into your process is unbelievable.
And especially I mean, I want to especially plug the Moore scripts, not because people should be writing 10 pages to describe one page, but because there's so much there that you can pick and choose the things that again, it's the language and the choices that he's making. It's like, okay, great, I'm seeing all the ways that you can describe a thing, you know what I mean? And that's powerful, because even though my version is going to be just a few sentences for the panel, like I know that I can say an upshot from this, blah blah blah, like there's so much there that you can absorb what you want and leave the rest behind. And it's just the more you can read and the more you can see how one can describe something, the better off you're going to be. So
it's funny. I was having a discussion about a certain brilliant comic artist with a friend today, and the interesting thing is that like I think people like Moore. I think Moore might. I mean, I don't know, but I think he might be, on that level of genius, like as a thinker.
Yes.
And I think like it's really tough, even if they're capable of explaining it to people. Like genius is its own thing in the relative terms of where they go. I don't understand why you can't just see it as I see it. Because they consider it simple. Like there's this, so the artist I'm thinking of is a genius and sees what they do as so simple.
Yes.
And they're capable of defining and describing every single sort of process of it. But, and it's like, I was relaying something, like, oh, this kid, weirdest thing, I was doing free comic book day and this kid asked me to draw John Wayne. 11-year-old boy asked me to draw John Wayne in 2019 or 20 or whatever, maybe earlier. And I'm like, how does a kid even know John Wayne exists? And like this artist, like, whatever, like big nose, big hat. And I'm like, for you, that's the answer. And what you'll do will be the perfect thing. But for me, that's not the answer. Like it's totally. But like you can break down all the elements of what are important in visual storytelling and be able to list them as a level of importance and do it.
I mean, some of it is natural genius and some of it's that they've taught themselves to think in a certain way. And it's like, after a while, you've taught yourself to think for so long that you forget that you've taught yourself to think that way. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, no, you just see things in these terms, and it's an artist sees things in a way that I can't imagine. Like that exactly, the big nose, big hat thing. It's like, that's a wild simplification but there's such clarity to that. I know,
it's this abstract thinking. Like it's being able to abstract something. So it's like design. So it's taking something and turning it into design. Like I'm taking a human being and I'm turning them into design. So the abstract is big hat, big nose. Totally. And then on top of that, then there's all this craft that you can employ to then
Exactly.
define those things to make them have whatever value you need, you
Yes.
determine that's going to be there. And I think the same, and the same goes with writing, because like, I mean, when you're sitting and you're writing, you go, oh, okay, like I'm sitting here and I need to either describe something, or I need to, hey, what does this character want, and what does this character want, and
Yeah.
how are we going, and like, you don't want to do like I want this. Well, I don't want you to have that because I want this.
Yeah.
Well, I don't, like, that's not it. You have two separate conversations going on. Like, this person isn't answering this person's question. They're asking their own question. And
Exactly.
you somehow get to that end point sooner and with more color and sort of clarity, rather than being like plotting,
This is what I want. I mean, yeah, I don't think what you're right is everyone wants something and everyone needs to want something, but I don't really necessarily think in those terms so much, because
right.
I don't think in those terms as a person always. Like, this is what I want. Like, when I'm talking to my wife and we're arguing about something, I'm not thinking like, well, this is definitely what I want. There's a bunch of illusions about what I think I want, and what we're actually talking about, and like,
Sure.
and so it's like, I don't think, though that stuff has to be embedded, and like, you at this point, I think it is kind of just naturally embedded in my work, and then at the end you check it, but like, to your point, like, I've gone so far, I guess, in the process of writing and learning to write, that you're no longer thinking about those basic things anymore. Whereas before, that was a really profound thing that I needed to think about.
Mhm.
And I think of, if you're a tennis star, you're not thinking about every moment of your serve,
No,
right? And
you
if you
can't
do,
move.
yeah, and if you do, you're screwed, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you do start thinking about every single thing, then you lose the fluidity of it.
What I used to do with tennis, with fly fishing, and even throwing a ball, I would do it with my opposite hand.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, because I would have to think out the mechanics and try to figure it all out.
Yeah.
So I've always kind of applied that to however I try to learn things. It's not that I sit in this situation like Howard, teaching himself to draw with his left hand, but it's a matter of like, how do you, what are the steps that you need to do to get to the thing that you are doing with very little thought, but there might be mistakes in those steps. And
Exactly.
so figuring it out with the left hand is like, all it's doing is it's saying these are all the mistakes. And so you then like go, okay, how do I kind of work out this thing? And then that makes the sort of the natural hand have more of an effective approach. That's how I was able to do it. What was the first thing you put down on the script? Like, what was the first thing you said, like, oh, I'm going to write this?
It's hard for me to remember the exact first thing. I think I did a few shorts. Oh yeah, okay, I do remember the first thing. It was not a good story about like a guy who goes into a kind of an imaginary realm where it's like the shared human consciousness, and he's trying to create like a revolution in that realm that will then be felt in the external world. So it's it's kind of a very Grant Morrison-y idea, I think, and pretty transparently pretty transparently. So nothing ever happened with that, thankfully. I was super proud of it at the time, and it's unreadable.
Did you do anything with it? I guess. I mean, was this something you did and then secreted away? Was this something?
Yeah, this was something I did, and then was like, but then I didn't have any way to produce it really, and it was still so early in the process that like I didn't understand how to reach out to artists, and I didn't have any relationships with artists, and all these other things, and so nothing ever happened with that. That was actually while I was in I think that was while I was in med school. Was I wrote that one time, and I was exhausted, but it was just something I thought I needed to do. And then so nothing happened with that, and then eventually I started writing a few shorts, and I remember I wrote one called Murder One, which was about like Cain as a character, like the biblical Cain as a character throughout history. And I remember putting that online, and Phil Hester, the artist Phil Hester, who just happened to see it, was like, hey, there's some really good stuff in here. Can I give you some this was a comic book that was like actually made, like it was a 10-page comic that was actually made. And he was like, can I give you some pointers? And then he went at it hard with a red line, with a red marker, and it was amazing. Like no one had ever done that for me before. And it was just it was just I'm still super touched by that, because I was just a random person on Twitter, you know, and that he took the time to read it, but then also to kind of rip it apart was just an amazing thing for me. And then then after that, after one, I think that was a 110-page thing that I actually got made. And then I applied to something called the Miller World Talent Hunt, which is
Okay.
a very short-lived thing that Mark Miller did, where he would invite people to write scripts, short scripts for his characters, and he would pick the best script for each of the offered characters. So I think each year there was 5 characters that were allowed, and I wrote one for Starlight, the character Starlight, which he did with Goran Parlov, which is like kind of a Flash Gordon meets Dark Knight.
Yeah, that was a great. I love that thing. That was great.
Yeah, it was one of my favorites too. And so I wrote a 5-page script for that, and that won the first year of the Miller World Talent Hunt. There was only 2 years total, so I was very lucky to get in there. And so that was my first published work was actually through Image Comics.
That's so interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and so that was really cool. And then I did after that I did a book called Maxwell's Demons at Vault Comics, when Vault was still early.
Yep.
And that was my first thing, and that was probably the first thing that was representative of who I was as a writer. I felt like where I found my voice, which was not to say that it's my voice now. It's still very early version of me, but it was a lot of my interests and a lot of my feelings went into that book, and every issue was standalone. It's the story of a young genius, young boy who turns out to be the world's greatest supervillain, and so told from his perspective. So you don't really know that until the end, and that you can kind of see a lot of the DNA of my work in there, which is that I like density. I like each issue, if not standing alone, as in, nothing continues, being a meaty piece of story, having its own beginning, middle, and end. That book was for a while my only big published work, and then I took a couple years where I was just kind of unsuccessfully working on stuff and unsuccessfully pitching it, and working on my writing, which was, I look at that as an extremely important and valuable period in my life, where I was
woodshedding.
What's that?
You were woodshedding.
Yeah, exactly. I was woodshedding, and I was without the pressures of a deadline, and without the pressures of what the audience is going to think. Just making, but still working with artists. So I have a book, Agent of World, that's just coming out now, but we've been working on that book for there you go. We've been working on that book for 6 years or something.
I'm not good at this. There we go.
There you go. Yeah. And so we've been working on that for a long time, and working on that book, and then eventually 20th Century Men, in this time where, again, I can't say enough how valuable it is to be free. I think, especially in comics, there's all kinds of perverse incentives for the kind of work that we're supposed to put out, and to make disposable work, and to make to not work that's too transgressive or that's too different, because even as 20th Century Men has come out, we've been blessed with a lot of really great reviews, but also I saw a number of people saying like, oh, there's too many words in this, I just can't read this. And I think if I had been a little younger or earlier and I'd gotten that kind of feedback, it would have really hit me harder and made me write, to what more maybe the broader audience would want. But but because I've been so kind of outside of the incentive structure of comics for a while now, I think my work is getting kind of weirder, but more specific and better, and just more original as a result.
Did you, when you did the Miller World thing, I mean, was there editorial response, like when you did this, like did they take your script and did they say, hey, can we, would you do, I mean, was there sort of feedback, or was it?
From Mark, yes, and very simple feedback. So Mark had a rule that the first page could not have more than 4 panels in it.
Okay.
And if you look at his work, I think you can see now that that's actually a rule that he puts forth almost.
It's a max.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. It's a rule that he kind of adheres to, though, almost for every page of his work. Yeah. And so you can see that is somebody who, they feel that they figured out a way that comics works, and that works best. And and he's able to do a lot with that, with those 4 panels. each one of those panels is carefully chosen as a result. And I think it's a fast reading experience for a lot of people, but it's also, there's a certain clarity there.
Yeah.
And so that was the only feedback I got, though, was your first page has 6 panels. It has to have 4 panels.
Okay.
That's it. Everything else, I had known what his work was like, and so I intentionally left it 3 panel pages for most of it, because I knew, because I was marketing it towards an audience of 1, essentially,
right,
in that script.
I mean, I think it's such a powerful opportunity, like, and like, you know, anybody who's making anything, like, get to work with an editor as quickly as you can.
Yes.
Like, because what you want, I mean, because while it's great to work with another artist or a writer, whatever sort of, you know, discipline you're working in, it's having a person who's a little bit outside of the actual creation of the project, who has a little bit more of a omniscient eye on the work, is so helpful.
Yeah. I mean, and that can be another writer who's not involved in the work
sure.
at all. So I have a friend, one of my best friends in the industry. His name is W. Maxwell Prince. He does a book called Ice Cream Man, and you know, he'll sometimes review my writing and edit my writing. And he's just such an incredible writer. He has that skill set because he has been an editor before. And so, you know, working with an editor who really gets it, and an editor whose goal is not to produce a product, but is to understand your goal and to help you get there that much, you know, more efficiently, that much better, that much clearer, I think has been amazing. It's an amazing thing, and it's, you know, it can be hard to find when you're first starting out in writing.
Oh, for sure. And that's why I'm just saying, like, you know, the sooner you can get your hands
totally,
you know, messy with an editor, you know, and, you know, you touch on something that's, I find, is such a curiosity to me, because, like, you know, before getting into business, you know, it was, you know, I was in school, so we were all just about talking about making comics and, you know, sharing all our ideas with one another. But I found, like, the comic industry on the creating end of it was very insular in that sense.
Yeah.
And then as I've been writing novels, I find that novelists are really, really interested in reading and talking about what you're working on. Like, so you have your alpha readers, you have your beta readers, there's all these sort of layers of people reading your stuff, giving you feedback, along with an editorial side and an agent. You know, there's so many people reading your book, giving feedback. But in the comic industry, like, I like, it's like everyone's playing poker and holding these cards real close to their vest. And I go, like, why are we not so sort of like, all right, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm doing. Like, what do you think? What do you think? Am I right direction? You know, and running with it.
Well, I think scripts are not always very fun to read, is the thing. And so, like, a lot of what you're, you know, at the point where a comic book has been made, it's kind of like, why am I going to ask the artist to redraw a bunch of stuff because I wrote it poorly? So that's the fun part to read, is the comic. And then the script can be, you know, a little utilitarian a lot of the times. It's not always the most fun thing to read. So it's just, who has the time to read my scripts? You know, there's not that many people, you know, that, unless you have this kind of mentor-mentee relationship that we've been talking about. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we would benefit hugely from more eyes on it, and especially with something like 20th Century Men. You know, I want to make sure that you know, a lot of that Russians are reading the work, because there is quite a lot of cultural stuff there. You know,
totally. Well, I mean, like Brett. I mean, Brett did his homework. He did not just run into that, you know, and go, here's what I'm doing, you know.
He was a person that's a great example of, here's somebody who was like, he did his homework, and then he also had, you know, like you said, beta readers, alpha readers, like all these people reading his scripts to make sure that it was okay, and reading the final comic book to make sure it was okay, and then changing the lettering a trillion times. You know, and he said his letterer almost killed him, you know, because
his artist almost killed him. His letterer
exactly.
I mean, it's you know, and, you know, I mean, Brett has, you know, he has ideas, and he wants to see them, you know, all the way through.
He's so specific. His idea, like his idea of how this is supposed to be, is so, I admire that so much, because I don't always have that kind of a it has to be this way feeling about things, you know. And I think that clarity is amazing. I don't.
Oh, I mean, it is so admirable when there are artists like that. You know, it's infuriating because it could be exhausting. But the idea that, like, like my wife is an artist, and so like when like she's like, okay, I want to do it this way, and I'm like, well, we could also do it, and like she's like, no, it's got to be this way, and like come on, like I mean, because I come from the world of of design, where we like, listen, we've got to figure this out as as a group, and we've got to work this thing through, and this, because the inherent difference is that the design has to work for everybody. That piece of artwork only has to work for her.
Yes,
it doesn't have to work for anybody else. So
I think that's so. Me and my wife have a very similar dynamic where I'm kind of like the diplomat and the bridge builder, the consensus maker, almost to a fault. Sometimes it can be bad because, and my wife is much more like, she's happy to be the iconoclast. She's happy to stand up against everybody else and say, no, you're wrong, I'm right. Like if this is 100, and again, sometimes to a fault. There's a good balance. I think having a couple, there's a good balance there, because it's like I can bend over a little too easily to to things that I shouldn't, and she can be a little too rigid, and so it's like,
So you're saying the only child of two immigrant parents is the bridge builder in a third country, huh?
Right. Okay. Yeah, and they argued a lot, right? Yeah, they argued a lot. So it's like, two parents from two different countries that are total opposites in culture. Totally opposites what they express. So it is almost comically cliche, I think, how I turned out as a person.
I mean, we are products of our environment, and I think I think this, but like your stories are that way as well, in the sense that, like, from your point of view, I mean, this is you're a multicultural individual.
Yeah,
and your stories are all very much in that vein that I've read, and I think it's that hanging out in New York City for an hour,
totally.
Like it is what it is going to be.
I think, and I think as I've gone forward too, and something that comes from just my experiences is the realization that people are infinitely deep and infinitely beautiful if you can see them the way that they see themselves. I think everybody sees themselves in a certain way and loves themselves, because you have to, otherwise you'll kill yourself, right? So if you can see people the way that they see themselves, however it appears on the outside, if you can have that kind of cognitive empathy, you can discover that every single person, no matter how strange or mean they seem, is beautiful in some kind of a way. And it's the difference, their weaknesses or their differences in expressing it, are one thing, but usually people, fundamentally they're cooperative and they're lovely, and I try to put that into my work. Like, if you can go deep into a person, you'll see that there's no such thing as a villain. There's no such thing as a hero either. Everyone,
right? No, I mean, there's a huge level of moral ambiguity in, like, so reading Bloodshot and reading 20th Century and reading Agents of the World, like, there's a massive level of ambiguity with your protagonists in this. So this is not a sort of a clear cut, like, I mean, the clearest, and they're all coming from their point of view, like, it's their point of view, like, listen, everybody in the story is the hero of their own story. And
they're all justified, right? Like, everyone's justified.
For sure. And it's like, so like thinking about, like, the Bloodshot story, like was that work for hire, or is that something you posted them? Okay, because I had guessed it was work for hire reading the other ones. I'm like, oh, like, how, like, so I'm kind of curious how you approached that. Because the other two clearly are like creations of your own sort of like persona, and like this one is sort of. Now, were you a fan of Bloodshot, like, previous to that, or was it a research thing?
I've read some stuff from Bloodshot. I wouldn't call myself a fan, but like certain runs, the Lemire run was pretty popular, and so I dabbled in that, and that was super cool. I wouldn't say I was a fan of Bloodshot, but I went back and read a lot of the work, and there's a lot of really cool stuff there. It was for me a matter of so I was asked to just pitch for a Valiant anything, and I pitched Bloodshot, but did not expect to get Bloodshot, because Bloodshot is like their Batman. And so it's like, if DC comes and asks you to, as a new writer, to pitch something, and you say, well, I'd love to write Batman number whatever, like the main Batman title, they're gonna laugh you out of the room, right? So it's like, but I thought, okay, I'll throw this off, because they said they're mostly looking for their main characters right now. So okay, I'll throw one off. Bloodshot it was the super soldiers concept, that he's hunting down these super soldiers, and they really hooked into that, and really liked that. And so then I was asked to flesh it out into something a little bit more elaborate, issue by issue breakdown, and then stuff occurred to me, and then that was when I really started to think about Bloodshot as a character. I was reading his old work, and what was interesting beyond just this kind of this, what I thought was a strong but simple story engine of Bloodshot's hunting down these escaped super soldiers. That is a great way to do a serialized book, and I think
procedural.
It's a procedural, exactly. I mean, it allows you to turn every issue into its own little story, and it's worked so well for serialized mediums. So I thought that's great, but there needs to be more here. And so that was really about looking at what Bloodshot is as a character fundamentally, and then kind of what interests me about those things. And I kind of hooked into this idea of Bloodshot as a veteran, as kind of a traumatized person who doesn't know what's real and doesn't know what's real and doesn't know what's fake.
I love that.
So it feels, this is a book to me, I don't know if you've ever read Dispatches, Michael Herr's Dispatches, but like this is a book about Vietnam. This is a book about of men who have come back from war, and the scars that leaves, and that allowed me, all of the super soldiers are that as well. They're guys who work for the United States government, who are altered sometimes dramatically for the United States government, has given up their lives to the United States government, and then ultimately imprisoned by the United States government, sometimes for a very good reason. And so that was my way into the story, was, okay, this is a story about a guy wrestling with his demons externally and internally, a veteran specifically wrestling with his demons.
No, and it's, the great thing is that you have like, okay, here's the origin's the same. The execution it can be different for each one of these characters. The solution is holistic. Lock them all up. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if this person's never done anything bad and would never do anything bad. Got to lock them up because it's a holistic solution.
Yeah.
Then you spring them into the world, and then you have, how does every single one of these people handle that situation, along with that PTS reaction into their neurochemistry. So now you have this whole kind of thing, and then you get to sort of put that, you get to prosecute that out into the story world, and then let Bloodshot engage with each one of these sort of these scenarios as they come. And as you're talking about, like it's like a variant on Akira in that respect.
Totally.
Like it's interesting sort of like play on power and restriction and and expression, like putting all those together. So,
and Bloodshot is reflected by these characters, and so certain issues can be focused more on the characters and what they've gone through, but what they're going through is kind of a reflection of what Bloodshot has gone through in some kind of way. And then other issues, they're kind of in the background a little bit more. I mean, he's fighting them, but it's much more about what Bloodshot is going through internally. So, issue 1 is a little bit of a balance, but issue 2 has a lot more Bloodshot stuff, and then issue 4 has a lot more of the I call them spent shells, or the escaped super weapon story, because that was just so it allows you to, with serialized stuff, it can become also pretty repetitive if you're doing a procedural. And so it allowed me to do a lot of different things. I think it was meant to be kind of a pregnant brew, or a bunch of different elements that could make each issue feel distinct and different, not like you were just reading the same thing again and again.
Yeah, and just like Brian did, on why. I mean, like if it's a procedural, well, then you get to really kind of play with the form,
exactly.
And I think that's because as I read the first one, I'm like, oh, cool. Like he's got this thing laid out where he's got this amount of stuff, and he can kind of go, in as long as he wants to, chasing the storyline, and you can kind of have these you can make them beats, like there's this whole, and and there's going to have to be a bunch of like left turns that are going to come, and you're going to go like, there's going to be a lot of moral questions. And meanwhile, Bloodshot's dealing with this sort of really heavy psychological damage that is just grinding away, within and manifesting. So it's cool. I mean, like Yeah, but I mean, it's a great approach. I mean, it's a great sort of, hey, you're being asked to do something, and you're coming up with a solution, and it's like it's that great, it's the magic of writing when you get the idea.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, this is cool, and you start putting it down. But when you start writing the idea, well, that's when the other ideas come in.
Yes.
That like, hey, I built a unicycle, and look at
Yeah.
me, I'm going. But then you're like, oh, wait a minute, a second wheel comes into play, and now you can go fast.
Exactly.
And then a
Yeah.
third wheel comes in, and now you have stability.
Yeah.
Then a fourth wheel comes in, and now you have performance. Like, I mean,
Exactly.
these things kind of come in, and you're able to do that with story. Yeah, it's really cool, and I think there's something kind of cool. Like, listen, it's great, man. That's why we love the comic books. It's why we love Spider-Man and all these things. Like, as a writer, I mean, you can go and you can read this, stack of history, and then you can start teasing out stuff from there.
Exactly.
Here we go.
It's the same as doing like 20th Century Men, which is heavily rooted in real history, right? Like, but with a fictional history.
Yes.
And it adds all of this beautiful texture to the work and detail to the work that I might not be able to generate on my own. You know what I mean?
For sure.
That's the greatness of a shared universe, and that's why, like, the first issue is just establishing Bloodshot, but then the later issues, we have another character from the universe come in, or we just have even a reference to how a big mega corporation, the Harada Corporation, put out this car company, put them out of business, in a reference to like what happened in the 80s and the 90s.
Right, the engines, right?
Yep. Yeah. So it's like I think that adds so much to the work, whether you know that history or not. It makes it feel like it's a bit of a lived-in world.
Yeah, it totally does. It lends weight to it, and sort of the sense of history to it. Like, I'm reading it, and I wouldn't call myself like a super knowledgeable Valiant, but I'm like, oh, I could see the touch points, I could feel the touch points, reading this, the issues. So I'm like, yeah, it's there. I want to talk about 20th Century Men, because that one is the most recent thing that I read, and it's great, man. Like, I'm really, really excited. I love. I mean, on the artwork, and the artwork is totally cool, because I love how your artist is your artist. It's your artist.
Yes, Stepan is mine. We are truly like brothers, though. I mean, we have become so close in this relationship.
The variety of styles he's pushing to tell the different tales, rather than just relying on like coloring to set different tone and years and in that fashion, like really pushing himself to create these different worlds in the time periods. But I'm so digging so much of what you're laying down here. I love alternate history. So like, if you can take time, and then you can say, okay, but this happened, and now this is the reality moving forward. And what the crazy thing is how nicely the real things in the world do fit in, nestle into these kind of crazier, outlandish sort of solutions.
It was really interesting to think that thinking about like a competition of superpowers, literally making them superpowers. But that's what we called it, is the competition of superpowers between the Soviet Union and the United States. So it was such an obvious.
It was so on the nose.
It was so on the nose as to feel almost reductive and kind of like, really?
Why hasn't anybody done this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And of course, people have done it in various ways. But like, I am not the first person to do superheroes and realistic, gritty superheroes. But I think in this kind of weird political way, it's pretty rare. And so it was amazing. You're absolutely right. Like, it's amazing that the correlations that I found when I was doing the research, because this is by far the most heavily researched thing I've ever done. There's every issue represents like 2 or 3 real not like books, the historical books on the specific conflict, the Soviet-Afghan conflict, the invasion, on Afghan culture separately, on Soviet culture separately, on Russian history, Russian literature. And so all that stuff is really important to the book. And I think it's made it, though I have to delete a lot of it from actually being written out. I feel that you can, it's the glacier theory. It's
world building.
Yeah, totally. And I think that, but that stuff that you delete is somehow still in there. You know, and like, yeah, there's the negative space that it leaves from having been deleted is still in there. And I think you know, there's, so that stuff is so important. Doing that research is so important. But I'm also really proud of the end result. And I think as we go, it's also the most human thing that I've done, which is as a writer, I think that's really what I'm trying to get towards is just to make it, to put as much humanity on the page as possible. You know, to get as deeply into people as possible, and the experience of living. And what I love about Stepan changing the art is so much of this book is about point of view, and has become about point of view because I've seen what he can do with the art. But you know, it's the point of view is going to always be shifting, and it has already, even in the first issue, you can see it has been shifting. But we're going to have more and more characters come in, and I want you to see the world the way that they see the world, which is different from the way that, say, somebody like the president of the United States or the de facto leader of the 40th Army of the Soviet Union sees the world. You know, those people see the world one way, and then a reporter on the ground is going to see the world another way, and then an Afghan activist is going to see the world another way, and all of those people are going to be represented in the story, and all of them need to have their own voice and need to have their own take on the same set of events. You know, I mean,
how long of a arc are you putting up there?
It's six. Oh, it's only 6 issues, but each issue is wildly oversized.
Yeah, no, it's you hear that?
Yeah. But that's 40. That one is 37 story pages.
Yeah.
The next issue is something like 44 story pages. The next issue after that, we dip a little bit, and it's just 32 story pages. Yeah, exactly. Then after that, I think it's 40 again. And then after that, it's something like 52 or something. We just keep getting bigger, and the story keeps getting bigger and bigger. And I want to make sure everyone has room. So it's gonna be meaty. It's gonna be a meaty story, but it's just 6 issues and all $3.99. So.
Yeah, I can't wait to get through it. It's really good. I mean, I was super excited reading, and I'm like, oh, and this is like, it just felt great. I loved, and we mentioned voice earlier, like the voice with your characters, like that's the just that little shot of the boy looking out the back of the car driving away, like that voice is so Russian. Like it's just so like on point. I'm like, okay, like, okay. Yeah. I know where I am, and I know this character. Like you like that says a lot about the character. And okay, great.
There's a certain fatalism there.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. A cold, wintry fatalism there. It's like it's no joke. So that's cool. It's funny because I'm when I'm reading it, I'm thinking like, man, like, yeah, I want everything all in one thing. So like I don't know if you read Hope Larson and Rebecca Mock Salt Magic. It's it's so good. It's
so good.
So good. And I'm just like, I want more and more things just be one thing. Like I want a book.
I understand. Yeah.
And like I think like it's great that the publishing the world has said, okay, we're going to put money out for these things to happen. It's for kids. Like predominantly that's what we're getting. We're getting sort of, young YA-ish, or pre-YA kind of stuff. But I envisioned a not too far distant future where we're, like a 20th century's men type of book can just be a book, like.
Yeah. I mean, I think each story, I would love to do a book like that. It would be a different kind of a structure, like you don't have to have these cliffhanger endings.
No.
Not that you need a cliffhanger ending, but even just a stop point, the stop point. I think with 20th Century Men, it's so dense that I do think that reading it all together is going to be a cool experience, but it's going to be a heavy experience. Reading it monthly. Exactly. I mean, exactly. Like, not to compare myself to Watchmen, or to compare ourselves to Watchmen, but I love Watchmen. I love reading it all together, but it's kind of also like, am I going to sit down and read Watchmen? You know what I mean? Like,
I don't think I would have gotten through it had it landed as one book when I was in college at the time, so it came out per issue. And so I
Yeah.
remember, you had time to go to like read it, reread it, figure it
Yes.
out, go,
Yes.
I think I got what I got out of this. And then the next issue came out, you can kind
Yeah.
of keep going.
And those are the kind of comics that I like to make and want to make. Is comics are it's an expensive enough art form that I want to make something that you're reading for more than 10 minutes. And I do not want to make disposable comics. I as a reader, I didn't like that. I totally respect that people want to. Some people just want like a simple beach read or a fast thing. But for me as a reader, what I loved and what really made the lights turn on in my brain were the big ideas, the stuff that you could read again and again. And so I think with something like 20th Century Men, I feel that it will, the more you read it, the more you get out of it, and the more time you have with it, the better it'll be.
Yeah, and I mean, and I guess, I mean, as you said, dense is definitely a good word. I mean, I think it's important. I think we need to have a variety. Like, I mean, it's like not every book is a Jack Reacher book, and a Jack Reacher book is awesome.
Yeah.
But so is Tolstoy, and you have to have a shelf with a lot of different stuff on there so we can kind of, enjoy our way through all these books
and have a bunch of different types of people. I mean, I understand that 20th Century Men is not going to be for everybody. It's not even going to be for everybody who likes my previous work. I think Agent of World is more fun and more light and more funny. I could totally see somebody who read the one and then didn't like 20th Century Men. And I've seen comments that have been just, I couldn't get through this. There's just too much stuff in here. I totally get that. It's not for everyone, but I hope that it'll be for enough people. That it's something interesting and worth it and worthy.
I think there's a ton of great stuff in it. So thank you. I think people just need to take a little time and turn off the distractions and sit down and read something. And I think they're going to get a lot out of it if they give that thing and listen, it's a timely and prescient subject matter too. Which
is wild. Because it's a story that takes place in the 1980s.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
I'm gonna send you a link to a podcast which is with a basically the guy who is running many of the CIA operations during the Russian occupation of Afghanistan. And
I would love that.
Really, really interesting point of view. We won't have to talk about it here, but you and I can talk about it offline.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I definitely want to listen to that.
Okay, yeah, I'll send you the podcast. Let me just write the note here. Yeah, it's cool. But yeah, so I'm a fan already. I'm like I hate being a fan because that means I got about another comic book every month.
It's just a responsibility. I understand.
Dude, I'm so bad at it. It's just like one of these things where I'm like, I never am able to keep up with this stuff. Like it's a power that I lost. I was so good at it as a young person, but
that habit, it's I think it's easy to fall out of it.
It's really easy when the industry gives you comic books and you don't have to go to the comic book store anymore. And then when you're no longer in the industry and you don't get those free comics, guess what you don't do? You don't go back to the comic book store. So it's
I mean, I'm in the industry and it's very hard for me to take the time even to read comics that I love, that I know that I'll love. It's just you're busy, or when you're not working on comics, you don't necessarily want to read comics. It's it's a whole thing. Turning your love into your work is a whole other thing.
It's a scary proposition. It can really, really, really bite you. We got to be careful on that one.
But I still love the media. You still love the medium so much that I'm excited about it. It's just hard to read other people's work sometimes.
I mean, listen, I haven't been in the business, since 1999ish. But like, I love it so much that I'm like, I want to talk to the people making this stuff.
Yeah, that's great.
I sit and I write prose all the time. I have comic book stories, but like, they're really side hustle thoughts versus like the stuff that I want to do. But like, man, I love talking with people making this stuff because it's such a unique medium.
Yes.
It's such a really endless medium because you can do so much with it. And there's also like 4 or 5 different kinds of people I can talk to about it, writers and artists and inkers,
Yes.
colorists and letterers.
Yes.
I don't have to be, it's not all like, if I was just talking to, authors, well, it's not that it's not fun to talk to authors, but
it's one way of approaching the work, right? Like,
yeah.
and so it's what we're talking about, perspectives. A
Yeah.
letterer has a different approach to the work, and focuses on different things than I do, for sure. Just
For sure.
they just notice different things, and
And
have
here's
different experience.
it's what I consider like comic book creation is everybody in the process after the writer is another lens tightening the focus of what the end image is for the
Yes.
reader. And like, so like if maybe your script isn't super clear on something, that the artist is going to tell the story hopefully a little clearer, and then that inker is going to clarify those lines, and then the colorist is going to define all those elements in there, and with mood and tone, and then that letterer is going to make all the story have legibility from what's and it's just
expressivity, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Like I work with incredible letterers, and like they're always pushing the form and what you're able to do, and and even someone like Mazzucchelli talks about like what you can do with lettering, and it's just he's thinking in a next level way.
There's the right now, I mean, it's an amazing time for lettering. Like and while it's a sad time that we don't have people doing it by hand on paper, and I that little bit of me cries about that, because I love that part of the process. But there's so much, the tools are so much more powerful that you can do so much more with the lettering, And when I see like a letterer like Clayton Cowles, who just blows my mind every time. I'm like, what? And like I love me some Tom Orzechowski. Like that guy's the greatest, Like there's just this technical shift that's moved along,
I think you're seeing a lot of Todd Klein disciples as well now with my friend and letterer Aditya Bidikar, and my other friend Hassan. Like they're both just they really see it as not just trying to get across, not just trying to get the words on the page in a clear way, but trying to get at the story and the ideas and the emotions that I'm trying to get at.
Like they're working to create voice through typography. And that's like it's a super like that might have been my mom's number one pet peeve, was word balloons. So like it's always been something in the back of my head. I'm like, when like so like having a career in design, I'm like I mean, there's this wealth of typography. Why are we not using that in comic books? And there's now this generation of letterers who have grown up with a gigantic library of fonts available, and and digital tools.
I honestly didn't even notice that previously the norm was just for Todd Klein to have a font and he used it on everything, or I know that I think Clem Robbins has a specific font. I didn't notice that was the thing. Like you develop your font and then you use that, and then the people that want that font hire you for that book. And I honestly didn't notice that until I started making comics myself. And by then it was already changing.
No,
it's in Comic Craft and
I mean, we had Richard here, and like and like I mean that guy kind of arguably like maybe one of the top 5 people who changed comic books the most. It's kind of hard to argue that one. So it's an amazing thing. So and it's funny because I'm thinking about it. I'm like, man, like we lettering and coloring and and then the line work, artwork has all been sort of like revolutionized by digital technology. It has been complete, but the writing, we have yet to really see a digital sort of revolution that has somehow done something to the writer's world. There are great tools out there. Like there's great software for writing. I I like using Scrivener or other options, and pro writing aid is amazing. So
Yeah, I mean, I think just having like the word processor,
yeah,
computers was a big thing that you can delete really easily. But
it was,
it's weird because with writing, everything that speeds you up can also kind of throw you off. It's not always. I think there's something to be said for. I remember. I think it was Brian K. Vaughan also who said once. I write in Word because I want anything that slows me down is good for my writing, and
right.
so it's an interesting thing of there's always a balance, right? Sometimes I will write in by hand in long
Yeah.
form just because there's some kinesthetic intelligence that comes
Oh
out
yeah.
from that.
Oh, for sure.
So it's like the revolutions for us, I think it's just so interesting that they're not always useful. I mean, they're not always the best. They're not always what we need, I guess is what I would say.
Well, it was, I mean, I guess it's the other thing is that it's like, once again, like there's all these layers put on top of what the writer does for a comic book.
Yeah.
And so the work in so many ways is buried in the
Yeah.
in the eye of the beholder. And the digital revolution for writing happened in like 1982.
Right.
You know,
Right. Yeah.
it happened before the internet was ubiquitous. It
Yeah.
happened
It's the
before.
comp you add. Yeah. Like, yeah.
Right. So it was just like the first, home, using technology to write on a computer. That happened. Small number of people did it. A few more people did it. It was never like, there was never this, like now, if everyone had been typing on typewriters, writing longhand, and then 6 years ago, the word processor was invented, like there would be this, oh my God, change, sea change happening. So I guess maybe like I said, it didn't happen, but it already happened, and it happened in quiet fashion.
And then I also think for us, email is a big deal because of communication, right?
Yes.
I mean, being able to have a relationship with my collaborators is huge. I'm genuinely close with almost everyone that I work with in some kind of a way or another. And certainly it's not the old days of, well, I'm gonna I'll FedEx a script to my editor, and then he'll give it to the artist, and then I'll get it back, and then whatever it is. I've never heard of this artist. I didn't even know who the artist was beforehand. We'll never talk. We never have talked. We never will talk. That is I think that, though of course great comics I'm sure can be made that way and have been made that way, it is not a way that I would want to make great comics. And it's no secret that a lot of the greatest comics happened from a bunch of guys living in New York City all at the same time.
Super close, like getting together, being a part of things. I mean, like the phone was just stuck to my head in the 90s. Like you'd sit there, you'd be drawing and just talking on the phone all day long, because that's how you sort of kind of got your thing going. And little fun fact, Brett Lewis was an editor for a was it All-Star Comics? I can't remember the name of it.
Sports one?
Yes.
Yes.
In the late 90s. And he was the first project that I ever used the computer to get. So basically, the magic of FedEx was being able to get your project there overnight because you were late. That was that was the deal.
Yeah.
And like when I was that brief time in Atlanta, like I found out the trick was there was a FedEx drop-off point at Hartsfield Airport that you could get there at 10 or 10:30 at night. So you could even be later than normal and still get your thing there the next day. Well, I did a piece for Brett, and it was late. So I was just knowledgeable enough with computers at the time. Remember, I was told you I was really powerful early on with computers.
Yeah.
And I so I scanned the piece of artwork, put it on and then I was able to email that artwork file. This is in 1999, 98, 99. I emailed that file to Brett, and he's like, we can't, like, there's nothing, we can't do anything with this. So there happened to be a FedEx. No, sorry, there happened to be a Kinko's before FedEx a Kinko's down the road from their offices. So I contacted them. I said, well, if I send it to you, can you guys put it on the disc, and then they can pick it up? And they're like, yep, no problem. So that's how I was able to get the piece that I was to them without having to use FedEx.
Yeah, that's it. Just the Wild West, I think. in those
was
days. Like all the photo, because he still has like a bunch of photocopies and stuff with notes from the Wintermen and stuff. And so I've seen that stuff, and it's like, that's how you did it then? Oh, my God, man. That was in the early 2000s, I think. It wasn't,
sure.
but it was just a totally different way of doing comics, it seems.
Yeah, no, it was totally different. Like, yeah, I mean, it's, and there's a beautiful quality to all that. Like, I mean,
Totally.
it's I mean, everything was very sort of in hand.
Yes, yeah. And that's powerful. I think, I mean, even now, I don't print off all the pages and make notes on them. I do that on a PDF, but
Right.
I would like, there's some part of me that would like to, because there is this kinesthetic intelligence that comes out, like just seeing how things look on the page, and then kind of crossing it out, and you know what I mean? Like, it's just, there absolutely, with every advance, there's something lost and there's something like there's a lot gained, but there's also something lost.
There's always something lost in translation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what that means, and it's super. It'll always be that way, and we're
exactly, like discs, like digital music is great, but there's something lost from the record. You know what I mean? Like, and there's something gained.
Yeah,
right. There's something gained too. Like, there's a certain clarity that you're not gonna, but there's the depth.
Yeah, to be able to constantly go like, oh, what is that? Let me hear that music, and be able to listen to the music rather than saying, okay, when am I going to be near the record store? Okay, I got to go there, and maybe they have it, maybe they don't have it. Like, I mean, it's all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's there's the trade-offs, and we live with them.
But I feel super blessed to be able to be this close. Stepan lives in Croatia. Filia lives in Russia. Like, I feel very, and Aditya lives in India, and Haas, my letter, lives in the UK, and it's like, but I still talk to these people every day almost. You know what I mean? Like, I still have real relationships with these people.
For sure.
And that's amazing, and that's only possible with the technology that we have today. And I think
this stuff,
and it's like, I think the book reflects that. I think, as I think a lot of the best stuff in comics has come from the writer artist, the one person making a thing. And so not only
no, but it's a really unique thing
when you have a genius in both too, like somebody like a Frank Miller, who is, it's not just one thing or the other, or a Mazzucchelli, like, like there's nothing like Astra's Polyp. You can't make that book except for him, and that's one person with everything integrated. That's an amazing thing. So the goal of my work is always I'm never going to be that kind of an artist. I came too late to creativity. I would like to one day get better, but and I know that you can, but that's never going to happen for me. That I think my drawing would be at the level of my writing.
Try your left hand, dude.
Yeah, I'll try exactly. But with something like 20th Century Men, I can kind of feel us all coalescing into something that almost feels like it was made by one person, which is a really special thing, I think.
I mean, and I think that's the thing. I mean, I think we have these two distinct sort of way comics that we see that stand out, and I think it is there's this sort of independent person who's making something that's unbelievable. And like, I mean, I say it all the time, like what Cliff Chang is doing on his Catwoman thing is just, it's the mic drop,
or Darwin Cook on New Frontier.
Oh, here we go. Bam, like,
or the Park. Exactly. I mean, or Parker, even better.
Like it's just like, and it's so unique because it's an artist's expression. It's an individual voice, and you're seeing this whole thing, and it's unbelievably powerful.
And they understand both sides of storytelling so deeply, and they're innovating on both back and forth, which is incredible.
Yeah, like I love Jeff Buckley, but I also love the Beatles. You know what I mean? Like, and I like both of those in my world, because I want to hear this one thing from one person, and I also want to hear like that band, you know.
And
like,
I mean, as a writer, I feel like I'm bringing something unique and important to this work.
You are, because nobody would say yes if you didn't.
Right. But so I think a work can feel bigger when you have a lot of people working on it.
Yes.
But also there's just something there is something special about that. So when we have a bunch of people working on a book and we're communicating a ton, I think we're getting the best of both worlds, or closer to the single creator who's making something, but also with the fact that I know a lot of things that Stepan doesn't know, and Stepan knows a ton of things that I don't know, and it would be very difficult to find somebody who knew all of those things and had all the time to do all that research and to, you know, and to have those thoughts. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, it's a cool thing, and it's a great, you know, it's a great medium. I cherish all my verbal and personal, you know, communications and relationships with the people in this industry, because I think it's just some magic, you know, happening all the time.
Totally.
And the passion is, you know, because, you know, I say it all the time. I have my 12-year-old theory is that we lock into the things by the age of 12 that we're going to love for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And if you're able to sit and make the stuff that made you excited when you were 12,
totally.
Ooh, there you go. There's some happy people.
Exactly. I've never been, you know, I was in medicine before this. I've never been as happy, you know, in my life as I am now with the kind of work that I get to do and the kind of thing, the way that I get to spend my days. And there's not that much money in comics, which sounds bad, but it also means that there's not a lot of people coming who aren't passionate about the work. You know,
true.
Which is amazing.
Right, because the industry from both sides of it, from the fans and from the creators, quickly sniff out those people who are like, I'm here to like make a comic book so it'll become a big movie. Like,
yeah,
like we can sniff you out a million miles away, buddy. You know, like,
yeah,
you know,
and it's
like,
just the movie industry. Like, there's a lot of people that love movies, making movies, but then there's a lot of people involved in that process who don't love movies, and they're trying to make money because it's a great way of making money.
Sure.
In comics, it's not a great way of making money. I'm sure people can make money, but like it's not. It doesn't draw that many people. So it's what you end up with is a lot of people who are very passionate about comics and about the book.
No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, there's only a few channels of making, you know, great revenue, and you know, you either got pointy ears, you got claws, and you got webs. Like after that, it gets real thin. Whatever. So what else? I mean, you've got 3 books happening right now, which is a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure you're pitching for things next year.
I have one thing that's been announced that won't come out for a couple of years. It's we were talking about OGN's original graphic novels for middle grade readers, younger readers. It's called Magus Minor. It's with Holt. And we're very early in the process of that. That won't come out until I think 2025 or something, 2025, 2026. And it's kind of it's a original graphic novel, all one thing. And it is about it's a kind of a magical girl thing. A young girl finds out that she is the Magus Minor, which is the assistant to the Magus Major, who is the kind of a Doctor Strange magical protector of the universe, of the Earth. And she has to learn how to become, the Magus Minor and fight all these creatures. And over time, what she learns is she doesn't really like doing that. What she likes to do is use magic to do small things for people in her community. And so it's kind of about, about seeing a lot of horrible things going around you and feeling kind of powerless to do anything about those things, and doing what you can on a small scale. Using what power you have on a small scale to make differences.
Also sounds like a whole sort of like, you know, relationship between destiny and your and sort of free will, you know, like, because like if you're like, hey, you're destined to be this person, you're like, but that's not who I see myself to be.
And as somebody who switched careers late in life, I guess that probably played in. So we're really excited about that. That's with Henry Holt Publishing, but again, very, very early in the process.
Yeah, but that's exciting. I'm super excited about that whole genre of, you know, of middle grade reading and, you know, graphic novels. I think it's amazing and
so important, because again, just different types of people reading comic books, you know, and that's it. I feel so excited to make something that I can hand to my young nephews and nieces. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah, that's great. Awesome. Well, everyone can find you at Deniz Camp, DENIZ.
Twitter.
And Twitter. Yeah, he's on Twitter, always doing something good there. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. This was such a huge pleasure. I had a great time. I feel like I want to do a different podcast that's just about your stories because frankly I was more interested in your side of this than I
No,
than I
you have
want.
today. The big story is all about you, man.
But
But
seriously,
yeah.
it's super huge pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh no, I had an absolute great time, and I'm really looking forward to carrying on. Maybe we could do a more in depth thing of like how you approach a script and how you approach pages, writing your pages.
Absolutely.
In that process, maybe we can give some people some information and some some learnings from
Some
that.
examples. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I think people. I mean, like that's it's being able to hear how someone does something is always to me is like, oh, that's I'll always lean in. Doesn't care.
I was just recently asked if I would give some of my old scripts to somebody online. Yeah, absolutely, anytime.
Yeah,
Just
we'll figure something out. But Dennis, it was an absolute blast. Super glad we got this chance today to talk. And
absolutely.
yeah, I don't know, I'm not going to do any of the closing stuff. I've given up. I'm not done. I'm
I
not.
respect that. It's
I'm not.
2022.
I don't care.
Yeah, they
if
got it.
If you're listening, you're listening.
Yeah,
There you go.
exactly.
There you go. There's the thing. Just tell somebody. There you go. That's the spiel. Tell somebody.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, hey, till we talk next time. All right.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. I'm looking forward to it.
All the best. See you.